the NFL draft, if you look at it, quite possibly pick the perfect 4 teams for the college football playoff. Explain, Caleb.
Yeah, so if you look at number of players drafted by team in this past year's NFL draft, Michigan led the way. Who won the national championship, Dave?
Who did win the national championship that year?
There's this team named Michigan.
Yep.
2, 3, and 4. Texas, Alabama, and Washington. Guess who tied Washington for number 4?
I'm interested.
Florida State, the team that everybody thought was left out, the team that the best team that didn't make the top highest ranked team did not make it. And wait, I'm not even done. Guess who was number 6?
Who was number 6?
Georgia. That was the top 6 of the college football playoff rankings. Those were the top 6 teams. And the top 4 had the 4 most drafted with Florida State tied. But again, Florida State, I think we know probably would have gotten in had it not been for the Jordan Travis injury and a few things that went down that way. So is this validation for the college football playoff?
I don't think there's any validation to be had with 4. Because I believe a 5th place team has as much of an argument as a 4. If you can't get into a 12 or 14, I got no argument for you. So I'm not trying to sidestep the argument altogether. And I'll tell you who I think that the best 4 teams are or were going into last year. But I think that's the biggest problem you have right now, Caleb, is that to me, you've got to be in that 4, and if you're not in your 5th, you've got an argument. Am I wrong?
Yes, because I think you're thinking about just last year. There's a lot of teams where
no, I do mean in general. I don't think the 5th team has an argument. I don't think the 13th or 15th team has an argument.
But see, here's my issue with that. The 5th team had an argument this past year. And by the way, Georgia had an argument too, because honestly, on a talent base, Georgia might have been the best team in the country last year. But then you go back to 2022. The 3rd team didn't even have an argument. It should have just been Michigan and Georgia playing for the national title. They were the only 2 undefeated teams. The other 2 who got in were TCU and Ohio State. Both of them had a loss and didn't even win their conference. I don't think either of them had an argument. And by the way, we found out TCU didn't have an argument because that was embarrassing what happened to them. So it goes year to year. I mean, this is the catch. And I get what you're saying, go to 12 because like 13 never has an argument. But there are some years where 5 has an argument. There are some years where 7 has an argument. And then there's some years where really nobody more than 2 has an argument. Isn't that fair to say?
Yeah,
it's year to year.
That's very fair to say. So out of that group, I think I know what you're going to say. Which of those teams could Tennessee have played with and hung with and perhaps beat?
Well, this past year?
Yes.
Well, I mean, we had the evidence with Alabama and Georgia,
right.
And they didn't hang, and they hung with Alabama, but I think Alabama just toyed with them in the first half. I know people disagree with me on that. Y'all can disagree with me all day, but Alabama just toyed with them.
I disagree with that. But anyway.
Okay. I don't think they could have hung with Michigan, even though Michigan is not like Alabama and Georgia were significantly more talented. I'm going to say they were more talented than Michigan, but Michigan was so disciplined that I think Tennessee would have just made too many mistakes and Michigan would have cashed in very early to take control of the game. I think they could have hung with FSU, and I think they could have hung with Washington because I just don't think those 2 teams were that great, quite honestly.
Please hit the like and subscribe button. We'll have Jimmy Himes joining us a little bit later. Always appreciate him. Brought to you by Varner Ford. Will we be having this same conversation about the 13th team or the 15th team, depending on if it's 12 or 14 playoff? Will we even be having the same conversation, Caleb?
No, what we're gonna have more conversations about is why do we have 12? We're gonna be spending most of our time saying, why do we have to like? I'm
disagree.
Telling you guys,
I've always said, even before they went to 4, 8 was the number. Because if you're 9, you have no argument. that's a 2-loss, maybe a 3-loss team.
8 was
But
the number.
What's that?
I said 8 was the number. I'm with
8
you.
was the number. 8 was the number.
I mean, it kept the regular season great, because what you could have done with 8, assuming the old Power 5 stayed in place before the Pac-12 just decided to fold, you could have had the 5 Power 5 champions, the best team from that group of 5. You know what I'm talking about? Those lesser leagues. And then you could have had 2 wild cards. Would have been epic. So much fun to watch. Nobody wanted to listen to me, but it's okay. 8 was the number. Here's the problem. Again, we're just 2 years removed from the selection committee saying, damn, we don't want to put any of these other teams in, but we got to put 2 more in because we got to put 4, and there should have only been 2. Now you're going to 12. I'm telling you, Dave, what's going to happen is when there's a 12-team playoff, we're going to look at years and saying, 9 through 12, they don't really deserve to be in, but we got to put them in because we have a 12-team playoff. You're going to be seeing that. You're going to see a 3-loss Penn State get in.
I tell you what, if it hadn't been for 2 guys that were born that worked together, named Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, I think we would have had some great college football playoff games. I think you just happen to have a generational, when I say generation, we overuse that word. I'm talking about a once every 50-year coach in Nick Saban, maybe the best ever in Nick Saban, and then his protege in Kirby Smart. So I think some of those blowout games that you kind of throw out would have been good games. It just happens you got 2 legendary coaches in place.
Okay, but let's just go back to this past year. If there were a 12-team playoff, you're looking at this 12-team playoff and you're saying, okay, the automatic bids would have been Michigan. Let's assume the new Pac-12 teams are in the Big Ten. So the automatic bids are going to be Michigan, Texas, I guess from the SEC, Florida State, and the Big 12 champion is, I mean, it's all the way down at Arizona at number 14. But then so then your wild cards become Washington, Alabama, Georgia. Long story short, you're getting like 10-2 Missouri and 10-2 Penn State in this thing. Penn State played 2 good teams last year, got wrecked by both of them. Missouri was 10-2. Do you think Missouri was a playoff caliber team last year? And Missouri.
You know, I don't. You know, I'm not very fond of Missouri as a program, but I think they would have had the type of offense that maybe made some noise, won a game they shouldn't, maybe came together at the right time. You picked the wrong team, basically, because I think of an offensive-minded team, anything can go crazy in the opening minutes, and then suddenly you're up 21-0, and the other team is out of their game plan. There are a lot of other teams I would agree with you on, but Caleb, ultimately, like I said, if you're 13, you've got no argument. Get out of there, and don't say you should have been 12. You should have been 1. You should have been 2. You should have been 3. If you get yourself in that spot, you don't have anything to worry about.
I agree, but you
just don't want to say that there's not going to be okay. Let me ask you this. You don't want to say that there's going to be a debate at 12-13, and I get that, but there will with some people. Not with sane, intelligent people. But what I would ask you is this. Can there be a Cinderella in the college football playoff as we have seen in the NCAA basketball tournament?
No. Football doesn't work that way. Football doesn't work the way basketball does. Basketball in a 40-minute tip-off, a team can pull an upset. In the NBA, which is totally geared towards the better team winning, Dave, you know, when the 1 plays the 8, they usually don't sweep them. They usually win in 5 games. So, but that doesn't happen in football. The talent gap is just so much different, and there's not as much randomness. So the better team wins in football more than I think any other sport out there.
No, I agree with that. But noise would be if a 12 upset a 5, right? I mean, that would be noise.
That's not going to happen. The 12 is going to be the group of 5 SMU team or Liberty or whatever. And the 5 is going to be the runner-up in the SEC championship game, who is probably the second best team in the country. And the 12 is going to have to visit the 5. The 5 is going to win 63-0 every time.
Work with me. 11-6.
Still not going to happen. 6 is going to blow out 11. That's going to be the second best team in the Big Ten, which is probably the third or fourth best team in the country.
I don't think it's going to be quite that bad, but we'll see. If it's watered down with a bad first round, that would be very disappointing.